As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. Tonight, our guest is a returning guest, Joel Salatin, co-founder of Polyface Farms, widely read author about local and sustainable food production, and speaker on many topics of the same area. Joel is here tonight to talk to us about his book, Everything I Want to Do is Illegal, War Stories from the Local Food Front. Welcome back to Reluctant Preppers, Joel.
Thank you. It's great to be with you again.
Now, on your last visit here, you talked about the self-contained home and gave us some very practical tips that people can use to provide for themselves, for their family, in ways that make them less dependent on systems outside their household and more self-reliant and self-sustainable. And tonight, we'd like to talk about your provocatively titled talk, Everything I Want to Do is Illegal. Now, what in the world does that mean?
Well, what happens is that when you kind of go off the reservation, if you will, of orthodoxy in today's world, there's a host of regulations to capture you. You know, if you build a solarium on your house, you know it's supposed to pass a building code. If you modify your house to a living roof. Goodness, if you want to build a different kind of a house, a straw bale house, a yurt, an underground house. I mean, anything that's unconventional will receive a lot of extra scrutiny, and in many cases, will be deemed actually illegal. And so there, a lot of people don't realize how intrusive regulations are right now until they embark on a self do-it-yourself self-containment path, because our regulations encourage dependency on the supermarket, on just do what the government says you're supposed to do, and your licenses and your compliance and, all that stuff. But if you're going to start, keeping your water at home and not put it down the storm sewer, but actually use it to, grow things, if you're going to, have backyard chickens or whatever, often these kinds of things run you counter to the official orthodoxy of the day, and that can be kind of disheartening.
And we've talked with that, and some of our guests who've been on the show, actual family members or homesteaders who are trying to make the transition from dependent, sort of being in this just-in-time, highly fragile supply chain structure that we live in, as what's considered conventional, to people trying to be more self-reliant, have run afoul of some of those things. We've had a fellow on here we affectionately refer to as the guy next door, who talked about running into trouble with the city from trying to raise chickens, trying to raise bees, and eventually having to move out to the country. But if you could tell us, when people want to make some of these changes, but they don't want to move, what are some of the things that they can do in place to keep from running afoul of the law?
Yeah, well, anybody that knows me knows that I'm a big believer of it's a lot easier to ask forgiveness than permission. And so, let me just run down some things. Let's take the chicken one. That's you kind of led with that. That's a good one to lead into. There's now an underground chicken deal in which it's run by Pat Foreman, the author of the book City Chicks, and she will now let you have chickens that just come for a visit. What's interesting is all these ordinances all talk, the verbiage in all these prohibitions is about owning chickens. You can't own chickens, blah, blah, blah. But what she's contrived is visiting chickens. And so she has an organization, it's a nonprofit organization, in which you can call and, get 2, 3, 4, 5 chickens and ask for a visit. And so you don't own them, but the chickens are simply visiting. Now, they might visit for 2 years, but they're simply visiting. And it's a technicality, but you know as well as I do, this is the game. This is the game we play. This is part of what makes life so exciting, is outsmarting the. If the fox is the government, we're in the hen house, so we want to outfox that dude. And so this is the kind of thing that can be done. And
in your book, you talk about other types of sort of low profile activities you can do, either that just won't raise attention, or that could be considered, depending what you call them, something that would be within the boundaries.
Yeah. Well, for example, rabbits. Rabbits are kind of a gray area because a lot of these laws make a pretty big distinction on pets. Well, rabbits are kind of cute and cuddly, and they're very quiet. They don't excite attention, and so a rabbit can almost be considered a pet. Of course, I realize people usually don't eat pets, but why couldn't you eat a pet? Some cultures eat cats and dogs, so you can join the tribe that eats its pet rabbits. Be creative. Be creative with these things. And so I'm a big believer in rabbits as a protein source, but you can certainly do a lot of gardening. There's no reason why you can't grow plants. Edible landscaping is a wonderful one.
Now that's going to raise a red flag right away for people who have like homeowners associations or whatever that specifically outlaw gardening.
Yes. Yes, and those are increasingly problematic, and I would simply force the issue. To say that a rose garden is fine, but a cucumber garden is not, is certainly a pretty splittable thing. And so I guess what I would encourage people to have is just a little more rebellious streak in them. We are cowed so often with that to be patriotic you have to be compliant. Well, the American patriots of 1776 were patriots because they were not compliant, and I think that you can get a lot of mileage in simply refusing to comply on some of these things, and just don't advertise it. But to grow a fruit tree or a nut tree, rather than a non-edible tree, is a great way to create this edible landscaping. It doesn't have to just be gardening. Vermiculture. You can have a vermiculture bin under your kitchen sink. There are all sorts of cool kits now made for that. Aquaponics. Aquaponics you can have in your house. In other words, these are things that you can do that nobody will see. Only your friends will see. There are aquaponic kits now that take about the same footprint in a house as a refrigerator. So, if you're really a thinking person, you can throw out the TV, throw out the entertainment center. We don't have a TV in our house, and it's a time waster anyway. So just throw that out and replace that footprint with an aquaponic setup, and you can have your own. You can have fish, once a month, and grow all of your own mesclun mixed lettuces, and cabbages, and things like that. Tomatoes. There's a lot of cool infrastructure that's been developed around that. Think about kiddie pools. There are prohibitions on holding water, like especially in Colorado. It's illegal to have a rain barrel, but a lot of people have backyard pools. So call your cistern a kiddie pool. And instead of having a fish pond, we'll call it a kiddie pool. A kiddie pool that we happen to have fish in. There are all sorts of things. I was just in Australia lately, and and this guy is in a terrible zoning situation. He's in an agriculture conservation zone, which prohibits him from being able to get this now. Can you imagine? So this is an entire region for agriculture conservation district, and he's prohibited from being able to sell anything from his farm on his farm. In other words, if I drive to his farm and want a cucumber, it's illegal for him to sell it to me because it's illegal for him to have a retail store on his own farm from his own produce. So what's interesting is he befriended several of the government agents, and they actually did want him to succeed. Fortunately, he had an idea and a plan for this direct marketing, and of course the local food system and tourism and all that. He had a lot of people in his corner, the economic development people and the tourism people and all that. And so the regulator said, well, okay, you can't have a retail store, but the zoning doesn't say anything about a regional distribution center. And so he now just calls this a farm product distribution center. And since distribution center, that phrase is not used in the zoning code, he now has an on-farm retail store fully sanctioned by the government, but it's not called a retail store. It's called an on-farm distribution center. And so, a thinking person laughs at this stuff. But if you're on the receiving end of the Gestapo, the compliance officer, these games are not. It's not funny. When they flip open their badge and say, you're now a criminal, that's not a fun thing to be in. So, it's funny to talk about. It's not funny to go through. But I give this story just as an example of the kind of gymnastics that you can go through. On our own farm, we did intern housing. Well, we can't have housing for employees, staff, or anybody here because we're in an agriculture district, and of course, the environmentalists have decided that people on farms is not a good thing, and because farms are America's playground, they're green space, and green space we don't want populated with people or houses or domiciles. I mean, in California, a lot of areas you can't even build a house for a family member on a farm. I mean, I was out there, and there was a farm that the next generation wants to come and make a living on the farm, and but zoning only allows them to have one house, and so here mom and dad are in the one house allotted. Son and daughter-in-law and family want to come onto the farm and join them as full-time farmers, but they can't have a house there. And so these guys actually built a yurt, and then they have a series of connected yurts. I think 3 or 4 nice big yurts, because yurts are not considered buildings, and so they live in a set of yurts that are all hooked together by hallways. And that enables them to live there without a building permit. On our own farm, we ran into this, with housing, and so we found out that in our county, you don't need a building permit if you live in an RV, like if it's a portable structure, or if it's a tree house, or if it floats, like if you have a farm pond, you float a house on the farm pond, there's no building permit required, or a hunt camp. And so so our intern housing is a hunt camp. The law doesn't say what you have to hunt. Of course, they're assuming you're going to hunt wild game, but it doesn't say you have to hunt wild game. And so we have a hunt camp for our interns, we call it, and they're simply hunting for the truth. So I think that the key here, and my encouragement to folks, is to realize that there are tons of really cool workarounds on a lot of these things. and if you can just think creatively and look at what the code doesn't explicitly say, you might be surprised as to what you can get by with.
Now, you also mentioned certain types of sort of low-profile vegetable gardening. Can you talk to us about how that can be disguised as something that doesn't look like a garden at all?
Well, yeah, there are wonderful stacking garden kits now for especially urban gardening, where where instead of having a clematis, for example, climbing up a lattice work on your porch, instead you have these little boxes with compost in them. The plants all cascade out the sides, and it looks exactly like some sort of a trellised vine or whatever, but it's actually all edible, and it can go up 10 feet tall. There was a guy in Kenya, actually. I think that's where he was. He had a very limited space, so he went down and got a bunch of old used, like 24-inch corrugated culverts, and he took a torch and heated the edges and knocked pockets in the side of them with made them red hot, and then whacked them with a hammer and made pockets. He filled them up with compost and then dripped water in the top, and he planted cabbage. These things were 12 feet tall, and the cabbages all grew, out of the culverts, and he had the equivalent, I think it was something like 25 acres of cabbages, and he was growing them in 1 acre in these vertical tubes. And so, don't call it, it's not a tube. It's you could call it the ultimate, we've got YouTube on the internet, call it a food tube, call it an F tube, or call it, anyway, it's not a garden, and let the other side go through the gymnastics of telling you that you can't grow food for yourself. I mean, that's where we've got to come to. I mean, Henry David Thoreau, big on civil disobedience, and to live in this country and not have the freedom to grow your own food is just it's un-American, it's inhuman, it's ridiculous, and so don't call it a garden. Call it a food bin, a food tube, a food call it a sculpture. Call it a food sculpture. If you took a great big watermelon and carved it up with a knife, nobody would argue with your ability to freedom of expression. You're expressing yourself through a watermelon sculpture. Well, this is an art form. A plant sculpture, a plant art form.
Yeah, you talked about the mental gymnastics that people have to go through to try to convince you that something as basic as growing your own food through gardening is unpatriotic. My folks, who lived through the Second World War, talked about the patriotism that was promoted then as of raising a victory garden. So there it was deemed patriotic to raise a garden to alleviate the pressure to feed the nation. And here it's been turned upside down and backwards by our politically correct modern era.
Yeah, and I think what the background or the foundation of all this kind of integrated food production thinking is really an extremely elitist. It's an extremely elitist idea, that an intellectual elitism that simply rejects as backward, hillbilly, redneck, intellectually disadvantaged anyone who would dare put their hands in the soil. That's for brown people. That's for those kind of people, and it's an incredibly condescending attitude to look with this kind of
Well, disdain, yeah.
Disdain, that's the right word. Look at this kind of disdain on people who want to be self-reliant, who want to opt out of a lot of things and be resilient. That's absolutely true. And so, and I think that when you push that envelope, it becomes very, very apparent exactly what it is. That it really is an elitist idea.
Yeah, it becomes more apparent on which side of the argument common sense resides, right, and from which it's lacking. I'm glad you brought up integrated growing practices. And can you talk, because I know that's one of the things that you specialize in, can you give us some examples of some things that go together from a permaculture or integrated stance that people can do on a very small scale? Oh,
yeah, there are a lot of symbiosis things. I mean, and remember that there is no animal-less ecosystem. So animals and plants have a symbiotic, synergistic effect, and of course, anyone who gardens, anyone who grows anything knows that manure is magic. I mean, it doesn't matter where it comes from, except for dogs and cats. That's not magic. That's hazardous material. But when you talk about, farm animals, manure is absolutely magic, including humans. And so what you're trying to do here is integrate, is have a very intricate relational integration of things. So if you take your kitchen scraps, feed them to your handful of chickens, and take the manure from the chickens to side dress your vegetables. Rabbits, the same thing. Rabbit manure is like horse manure. It's real cold. It's not hot like chicken manure, so it doesn't burn things. So you can actually go out to Swiss chard and kale and things, and you can actually side dress it straight with raw rabbit manure, and it's quite quite acceptable. And so you fundamentally integrate. Then, of course, another permaculture concept, of course, is stacking, so that you have, for example, we grow rabbits above chickens. So chickens are up above, rabbits are up above, chickens are below. Chickens are scratching through what the rabbits drop, making the best compost in the world. Compost with more species of manure in it is better than one species. So rabbit chicken manure as a nitrogen source for compost is even better than just one. So this deep bedding under the animals then makes, you're just feeding it with your carbon, you're raking your leaves and things, and many people live next to neighbors. The city's picking up their leaves. Man, go get those leaves. Don't let those get away. Those leaves are carbon. They can mulch your garden space, be bedding under your animals, and that'll be your carbon source for all of your production. And then then you can go on up. You can have grapevines, for example, are beautiful. They go up, and then above the grapevines you can have nut and apple trees, or some kind of fruit trees. And we have mulberries and pawpaws and pears and apples and plums, and you can run poultry, you can run rabbits under them, you can run grapevines, because all those fruiting nut type trees have what's called a fairly a mottled canopy. It's not an opaque canopy. A poplar, hickory, or shagbark hickory, that'll have a real opaque canopy. But most of your domestic fruit trees have a pretty open canopy, and so things can grow underneath them. You can space out your grapevines and even grow vegetables between your grapevines. You don't have to mow that. Get rid of the mower, and you can mow with the animals. You can mow. You can turn all that space into vegetables, and do a rotation. Where 1 year it's vegetables, and then you have 2 years of running chickens and rabbits, say, down through it, and then turn it back in the garden into food sculpture, and you simply use the vertical space. I'm a huge believer in solariums on the edge. I mean, every single house should have a solarium on it, and the solarium will give you passive heat in the winter, and it will allow you to grow cold hardy stuff in the winter as well. So you're growing vegetables in the wintertime, especially lettuces and cabbages and beets and carrots, things that are cold hardy. Grow that in the wintertime. And then during the day, the sun comes out, and you open your windows, and you have passive solar heat into your house. And most of our winds here in North America come kind of out of the southwest. So a solarium on the southern side gives you a second wind break anti-room, which cuts your costs way down. You can go to a living roof. You can have a beehive up on the roof and some vegetables. You hook up your exercise bicycle to your kiddie pool roof guttering runoff cistern. We'll call it the kiddie pool, and your exercise bike can pump that water back up on the roof to a drip irrigation deal. And if you have a living roof, it's now suddenly you don't have to have any air conditioner in the summertime because the transpiration of the plants creates a thermally a cool zone around your house. The cucumbers cascade down over the sides of the house. You go to the second floor and pick cucumbers, off the cascading vines, and it cools your house out. So now you don't have to have an air conditioner. And so if you suddenly become water independent, energy independent, and food independent, and your house and if it's paid for, you can live really, really cheaply, and not be very dependent on a lot of things. It's really cool to be able to to be that self-reliant on a very small place.
Yeah, it sounds like combining a lot of those synergies can really help people to avoid the need for streams of income that they would other have to use to rely on outside systems outside their family. And back on that small scale again, you mentioned earlier sort of the humorous anecdote of your acquaintance in Australia who opened a regional distribution center. So for people who live in a very difficult suburban situation where they really can't do any kind of outright selling of anything that they would raise, what are some creative ways that you've recommended that people consider to be able to get some additional value beyond what they can consume directly from what they raise?
Sure. Well, a lot of places have, business prohibitions and things like that. You would not believe how many people I've seen run a donation kind of thing. Just put an honor box out there. Yeah, once in a while somebody will come and take and not give very much. But other people will be exceptionally generous and be, and compensate for the folks that are a little bit stingy. And you're not running if you're not selling anything, you're not running a business. You're just running a charity. And the last time I checked, normally you can give things away. And so, of course, it'll drive the regulators nuts because they'll try to say that you're running a business and all that. But if you're not into commerce, if you're not selling, believe me, you don't have a business because it's in commerce where the transaction of money is that you get stuck. You can form a private club. There's a really good operating one in Louisville, Kentucky right now, where people join a private club. And so food is not in commerce, and the only way they can get it is to join the club. The secret to that is to prepay. And if you're wanting more information, I would encourage people to go to the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund website, and join, and then you can get templates on how to create these private clubs so that the food does not go into commerce. And this one is large with, lots of families, and they're selling everything illegal you can imagine, homemade cheese and soft cheeses and raw milk and uninspected beef jerky and bologna. I mean, all the good stuff. and the government can't touch them because it's not being sold. It's a private club, like a country club. The public's not allowed to come in, and so these are ways around. You can sell something and give something else away. I mean, like a goat farmer that sold their goat manure for $8 a gallon, and then if you bought a gallon of goat manure, they gave you a gallon of milk. And so there are schemes like that, and I just think that if we put our heads together and try to come up with these other options, if we worked as hard at creatively making a guerrilla run around compliance, instead of trying to figure out how to come up with the money and actually comply per their requirements, we'd probably get along a lot better. We'd probably be a lot farther along with what we want to do.
It sounds like that's one of your greatest lessons that kind of runs through everything you've said, and that's don't be overly impressed with the letter of the law and the intimidating tone or to be cowed into submission, but just take a deep breath and think more common sense thoughts and try to find a way that makes sense to you and that won't necessarily raise a lot of attention, and think of something you're going to call it that's different, and find ways to just be creative, and that way just staying off the radar and staying out of the regulatory running afoul of regulators.
Yes, and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to tell a regulator, we're not going to talk. We're going to talk via mail. This is my first thing that I counsel people when they get in these particular situations is don't talk to the bureaucrat, because the bureaucrats, they're not obligated to anything that they say. They are obligated if they put it in writing, and making them put it in writing will buy you a year of time, because they don't want to put it in writing. And so when they want to come out and whatever, I don't let them out of the car. Nope, you can't come here. You have to get a warrant, and you have to talk to me in writing. We don't have conversations. We're going to talk in writing. Suddenly they have to back up and think, and they can't just come in like they do willy-nilly. Because here's what I've found is lots of times they actually don't know what the law says, but the easiest thing for them to do is just say no. I mean, that's the default position. Just say no, and then then as a bureaucrat, nobody's going to call me on the carpet because I got creative, with somebody. Perish the thought that I would become creative with somebody and help them try to figure out how to solve their problem. Just requiring your communication in writing will make them think long and hard about what they're going to say, and then you have something that's a matter of a public record. Then if it's something that's just totally ridiculous, you can find it in the call the newspaper. Now look at the ridiculous. I mean, I've had, for example, food police here in the state look at me, and I have it in writing, actually written testimony, where in letters where they said that we can't allow consumers to choose their food because they're too ignorant. Now, when that's in other words, that's in writing, okay, in writing. And when you put that in the public sphere, in the media, and you name the person, and you put that kind of statement with their name, the public goes apoplectic. I mean, even as whatever dumbed down, ridiculous, and idiotic as our country is right now, still, that kind of statement resonates with people as being that ain't right. We shouldn't be at that point.
That's right.
And even socialists kind of take a bit of a back glance when they read that consumers are too stupid to choose their food. I mean, that's going pretty far. And so writing gives you a place of public record. It slows the system down to give you wiggle room, breathing room, time to think creatively, take a breath, get some friends together, and carve out some wiggle room.
That's good advice for all of us who are looking at ways of taking better care of our families and wondering how to do that despite some of the constraints or apparent constraints we may be facing. And we wanted to have you back in the future to talk about another one of your topics, which is equally provocative, called Folks, This Ain't Normal, a farmer's advice for happier hens, healthier people, and a better world. So just thank you very much, Joel, for being here with us and joining us on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you. It's been my privilege.